it is not about technology. It is about centering into systems change and problem solving.
It could be nothing less than a renaissance of digital government. That phrase may not mean what you think it means. The future is about solving intractable problems, centering the work on the citizen, and resisting the urge to put lipstick on pigs. Heat seekers need not apply. Our conversation with Tara Dawson McGuiness of the New Practice Lab, coming up. Plus, a new co-host for the show, who sounds exactly like this.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
Final frontier, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart, I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
Obama.
This is The Future in Context. I'm Paul Taylor, delighted you're here, and delighted to welcome Ashley Silver, who joins us as the new permanent co-host of the show. Ashley, maybe we can start here. Who are you when you're at work?
I consider myself somewhat of a jack of all trades when it comes to what I do here at Government Technology. I work a general beat, so I've covered a variety of topics from generative AI policies, which is kind of a hot topic now across the nation, to how agencies are tackling digital equity. So I've covered pieces related to that as well. And that's generally my story approach, to really uncover those great community-oriented stories that are personable and really draw readers and listeners in with an informative but emotional connectivity. So that's kind of what I want to do here. Continuing to expose them to intentional, honest conversations about the types of technology we have out there, and also how agencies are partnering with communities to make the greatest difference. And this in turn will ideally, I think, make government better, and then those working with government also better with those collaborations.
Well, we're glad you're here. Collaboration is one of the big through lines in the career of our guest.
So let's meet Tara McGuiness. She is the founder of the New Practice Lab at the New American Foundation. It is a research and design lab focused at the intersection of policy creation, implementation, and citizen and community voices. McGuiness also served as a senior advisor in the White House and in the Office of Management and Budget during the Obama administration. So in that position, she oversaw federal teams that worked alongside city, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders in Detroit, Baltimore, and Flint, among other communities. And McGuiness and Hannah Shank are actually co-authors of Power to the Public, The Promise of Public Interest Technology. It has been described as a powerful new blueprint for how governments and nonprofits can harness the power of digital technology to really help solve those most serious problems of the 21st century. One reviewer, a fellow you guys may know as Barack Obama, opined, "It's worth a read for anyone who cares about making change happen." You and executive editor Noelle recently spoke with McGuiness, so tell us about it.
McGuiness and her co-author thought this moment had such urgency that they just re-released their book on the power of public interest technology. All of that to help policymakers make the most of the moment.
When we started doing this work, it was hard for Hannah and I to explain to many people at a barbecue what this is that we were trying to do. By the end of the massive conversation we had about vaccination, people understood, oh, wow, it's not just about inventing a vaccine. The implementation of how it reaches people and it gets to all communities is important. I think in the peak of the pandemic, this kind of invisible work of how a policy becomes an experience for a citizen became visible, whether it was unemployment insurance or, emergency rental assistance. And so I do think the display of implementation problems and challenges and opportunities made relevant a conversation we were trying to generate about what public problem solving looks like.
McGuiness says that she realizes it's possible to have discussions now that were difficult before, if not impossible, because there is now a new shared experience, namely the rollout of the COVID vaccines. All of this has led McGuiness to an irreducibly complex metric.
My life's work has generally been making government work, but I realize it's really important. And part of the reason Hannah and I wrote the book, Power to the Public, is that it doesn't matter if it's working, if it's not visible.
Now, given that, where are state and local governments doing well, and where are they coming up short?
I think in 2023, we're having a renaissance of the role, importance, and possibility of state, local, municipal, county government. That is in part driven by a massive series of federal infrastructures. This is both the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure deal, and to some extent the remaining flexible dollars in the state and local fiscal recovery aspects of the American Recovery Plan. The heart and soul of all of these actions, whether they're new broadband efforts to bring, clean buses, more equitable infrastructure, the heart and soul of all of this federal funding lies on the shoulders of state and local government. And so it's both an immense challenge, I think, but truly it is a once in a generation level of opportunity, green space for state and local leaders to innovate, to do things they didn't think. There's a lot of flexibility to both build the clean new bus and build a new data system that allows you to see who it's reaching and who it's not reaching, or where it's breaking down. And so I think I would call it a renaissance. I think it's an incredibly important moment. To your second question of where are they falling short, or where is it challenging, we've been on a massive disinvestment in the very county, city, and state capacity over the past, I'd say, 20 years. And so at the moment where we have this opportunity, we're also facing massive retirement, the challenges, post-COVID that many sectors, including the public sector, see in retaining a workforce. And so I would say the capacity that's required to do big, new, interesting things for the future is a big challenge, and maybe the biggest challenge to the ability to take the federal investments that come in a short period of time and require immense capacity to deliver.
So this thing that we call digital government, it dates back almost 30 years. There is a considerable body of work that has been done in its name and to build it out, but at the same time, it still feels aspirational, something that's still on the horizon or around the next corner. The promise of digital government, now and then, has been and is the word transformation. Is that the right promise?
I'm not sure. I think we made a mistake to determine digital government is really only as good as it is understanding for what. Why would we take this piece of paper and digitize it? Why would we take this form or this process? And I think in the first version, and we write about kind of a major federal failure in this in Hannah and my book, but you see all the time, people just took a broken process and they digitized it. And then they were surprised that it was a digitized broken process. And so I do think the promise of digital broken government digital government and transformation is only as good as government transformation, full stop. What is the problem we're solving? Who are the people that you need to get that done? And then how do you use digital tools, which are constantly changing, to effectuate that change? And so the mistake that our problems will be fixed by a silver bullet called the internet or digital government, I think was never very honest. And so the art is to say, what is it that is broken here? And where will digitizing it break it farther? And where will digitizing it give us a chance to start fresh with a system that makes sense? A really good example of that is we write about this form that took many years inside the Department of Homeland Security. They just said, the internet has come. It started in the Bush administration. Let's digitize this form. And it turns out that people write in the margins of the form on the adjudication side, and that the way the form is used and who uses it is really important. And if you just digitize it, you no longer allow the notes to be sent, the circles to be made. And so thinking about what is it we're trying to do here? In this case, it was process immigration forms. How does it work now? How could it work better? And ask the people who do that work, what would help you enable your work? And that's where they ended up almost a decade later. But it wasn't just simply kind of putting a new technology on top of a kind of ineffective existing management structure or form.
Okay, Tara, so 18F was formed in 2014, and in the subsequent decade, many similar groups have sprung up to more eloquently bring technology to bear in service of residents. What have we learned in the 10 years since 18F launched?
That's a super question. And if you look, there is this inflection point, the birth of 18F, the birth of the U.S. digital services, the kind of massive growth of Code for America and a bunch of newer, COVID pandemic brought a newer set of delivery nonprofits and companies online. So to some extent, it's 10 years is still a young field. What have we learned? I think part of it picks up on your last question, which is, hey, this isn't about technology fixing our hardest social problems. It's about systems change, understanding humans, good management, and how we bring human-centered design, data in the cloud, thinking that is, who knows what the next generation of this is on AI, in service of concrete solving problems. And so I think if you look at V1, not in 18F, but in a number of the kind of external companies and players, there were many folks looking to sell the government, hey, homelessness, we have an app. We have an app that will fix homelessness. If someone sells you an app to fix homelessness, you should look askance. Intractable social problems will not be fixed by an app. Very few things will. Could you enable data sharing in a different way, bring people together as Community Solutions has done in so many communities with their effort to use data to get to zero homelessness by bringing people around the table and understanding different entities in a community, from the police to hospitals to homeless facing agencies. It wasn't a technology. It was everyone has a little bit of data. How could we share the data together and work through the problem? And so I think one of the biggest lessons is that it is not about technology. It is about centering into systems change and problem solving. And if you make the problem technology, you are not likely to make the fix. Do we have technology problems? Absolutely. Do we need to recruit more folks who come out of engineering school and design school and a suite of skills that have been used to kind of massively grow the technology sector in the United States and the globe into government as the best place to work? Totally, we do. But is the fix technology? No, it is how does technology enable us to meet the problems and challenges of our time.
You delve into some compelling examples of user-centered work in your book. And are there organizations, government entities that are getting this right?
The kind of flagship item I would highlight, and I'm not sure I could have even envisioned it happening when we wrote the book, is that the President of the United States came out through an executive order, now it's well over a year ago, saying consumer experience, consumer service is a mandate from me, the president, to the agencies. This is an executive order called the Consumer Service Executive Order, which kind of forces the agencies to think not just about the business of policy, which is incredibly important, and I've spent much of my life on. We care a lot about what policy is for families with young kids, but there isn't a kind of organizing force in the government to think about the life experience, which is one of the mandates in the Consumer Service Executive Order, of being, having a child and having kids under 5. The life experience of leaving the military, the life experience of retiring. And so it sounds silly to say, wait, the government isn't organized around life experiences, but the government was built, hundreds of years ago for a very different set of life experiences. And therefore we have, when I was working in the White House, we had 8 to 12 agencies that touch a family with young children, right? Who are all doing their best, but there's no, if you were invented today, I think you probably invent an agency that focuses on families. The agencies were invented for the moment of time in which maritime transport was really like a different level of importance to many, many citizens than maybe it is to like the shipping industry today. And so really like we are working with a house that was architected for a much smaller, much different country. And so giving it the command, as this executive order from President Biden does, to really focus on They call it consumer service. I would call it human-centered design, thinking about the person who experiences a government service and what it feels like. And it's incredibly simple. I talk about this isn't a new idea, right? President Lincoln used to drive isn't a Democratic or Republican idea. He used to drive his staff crazy. He had this kind of one-man user experience, ran on a weekly basis. He would open the doors to the White House and anyone could come in and petition him, widowers, pensioners, and at the time it was in some ways fewer people, more egalitarian who made it through. And then he would hand off assignments to agencies, walk right over to the Treasury Department and say like, hey, it's not working. I just heard from this pensioner that this is awfully slow. That is not a system fit for time, but this is not a new idea in the United States that, citizen is king and that we would be in a constant feedback loop with the public about what they need. And then we would be adapting our systems in order to be responsive.
I would not have guessed that the practice would have extended back to Lincoln's time. So that was a great anecdote. Thank you. And you covered some of this, certainly in your last response, but the rise of human-centered design as a practice in government. You talked about some of the work being done at the federal level. Have you seen that extend into state and local? Are they taking cues from the top in this area?
Yeah, and it comes in different ways. I think you can find it at the city level. You have a city like Austin, which has a kind of digital service, and built into the technology practices of making great digital product is human-centered design. But the practice, as we write about, of human-centered design was not invented by Silicon Valley. You can find threads of it in long work of anthropologists, in kind of much more anthropological research that's just in touch with folks. So that you could find it at the city level. I think, in fact, sometimes city and county governments are more intuitively in touch on the human-centered design side because they're just much closer to the folks who they serve. And so if you're a mayor and, garbage pickup is going slow, like you will hear about it in the grocery line. Some mayors have instrumented, Mayor Duggan in Detroit, who I admire a great deal, on both his campaign and when he went into government and his campaign trails, he created a system that if a certain number of citizens of Detroit got together, he'd come to their front porch or their house to hear what it was. By the time he was in government, he kept this practice going, but he created an app that back-ended, allowed them to record the data in 4 or 5 areas and to be responsive in real time, so that he could reach more houses than he could reach. At the state level, the Department of Labor in New Jersey has a consumer experience lead for unemployment insurance that was responsive to the situation of, wow, our system is running just fine and the humans are not getting checks in the quarter in which they applied to us. And so they created a person whose job it is to wake up and say, hey, we could be doing everything the policy said, but the lived experience of a consumer is very different from, is too long, is too slow, has a long wait time. The call center, you wait for 45 minutes and the question you asked is not on the list of things they can read to you. So some of this is a sophisticated practice. Some of this is incredibly basic. Just, my advice to anyone in government at the state, local, or federal level, especially in positions of leadership, is just to ask the question, how do we know this is working? What is the way once a quarter, once a week, once a year, we walk in the shoes of people who are attempting to get our help? And that can be as simple as send your senior leadership team to just sit alongside call center workers for a day at the federal level. It could be as simple as you'll find out an awful lot by waiting in the lobby of a client-facing service and seeing who's crying.
Tara, in the book, you tell the story about somebody in a public agency who listened well, who knew stuff, and who made some notes to herself. Then she shared what she knew with the people who were quite literally lost.
There was a person who was the security guard for one government service who had their own basically frequently asked questions that she helped people with. When they went into the office, it didn't work, and she could guide them through. This doesn't have to be complicated to find a way to listen. And the more you listen to what's coming up and use the data in your system to make sure that's kind of an average experience, the more you can be responsive. And often it's just nobody's job. It's not ill will or, just the number of questions on a form have compounded over 40 years and nobody thought it's my job to make it a 3-question form. Who does a 40-question form? It could be very lightweight, or it could be very sophisticated. There's a great number of companies out there that can help be hired to test the user experience with any government program or product.
Not that the responsibility for all of this lay on your shoulders, but what are you doing about it?
I went and built the New Practice Lab, which is a 1-part think tank and 1-part design and delivery shop, think 18F. We are a human-centered policy design shop. This means we do basically 3 things. We give state, local, and federal governments sprint teams like you'd find in 18F. So we gifted a sprint team to a state that was implementing paid leave and found their uptake was stuck. We sprint on a discrete goal. And then what we leave with is, wow, it's not even on the radar, the type of kind of granular problems on data sharing or eligibility, so that the next generation of big policy design reflects the learning on the ground of what real families are experiencing. So we run these sprints, we do ongoing qualitative human-centered design work, and then we graduate it to policymakers. We make this kind of in-between space of the citizens' experience with the policy visible, where people are making the next generation of policy.
So, Noelle, what sticks with you from our conversation with Tara McGuiness?
I was really intrigued by this point in time that we are in right now relative to digital transformation, and how she classified it as a renaissance of sorts of the importance of government in the lives of citizens.
How does her experience and expertise in the federal government map with what you hear from state and local CIOs?
Yeah, well, her experience with healthcare.gov and the rollout there and all of the lessons, I mean, it just ties very directly to what we hear from state and locals in terms of, on these big customer-facing projects, of which technology is such a big part. Technology is not the most important part, and you really have to invest in, the user experience journey throughout the process. What are people's lived experience with a service? And test your hypotheses over and over and over, and we hear those kind of refrains from folks all over the government spectrum.
On that very point about the lived experience, what did you make of her comment right off the top, where she was saying that if people don't see the change, feel the change, experience the change, then it's like it never happened?
It's very true. And it always strikes me when you see these surveys around people's feelings about trust in government and how low those are. And, really when you drill into some of that, it's someone had a negative experience with an agency, which is understandable. I'm not questioning that, but it's so limited to whatever my direct personal experience with, say the DMV, or any other agency that you might interact with. If that was less than stellar, if something felt overly complex, overly bureaucratic, impersonal, then that is going to translate pretty heavily into your overall feelings about government at any level.
Noelle Knell, Executive Editor, thank you. Noelle is part of our editorial and production team, as is Ashley Silver, Zoe Manzanati, and Kaylee Tedra. Our editor-in-chief is Kathleen Robinette.
You can listen and subscribe to The Future in Context on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, and Audible. If you like what you hear, you can help more people find the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars would be nice.
And that will do it for us. Next time out, the X Factor. When is it time for social govies to leave a social platform? And the new perennial question, what to do about AI? For Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. Thanks for listening. Stay connected to the show at tfic.tech.